Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Language Culture and Dr. Lou. And so today is we're going to discuss political buzzwords. And if you're joining me in the instant premiere, or if you're catching it on the replay, either way, please give this video a thumbs up. It will help promote the video. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please do that. That will really help my channel grow more than you could know. And so the political buzzwords we're talking about are all going to start with letters A through C, because this will be just the first volume of multiple volumes of political buzzwords that I'll keep putting out on my channel within the couple weeks. Within the next couple weeks, we'll see more volumes of this come out. And so today we're just doing A to C. And I want you to know that I'm not here to be pushing any political agenda on anybody or my political point of view. So because I don't like talking about politics on the channel, because it ends up getting pretty divisive sometimes. And so let's not go there. But what I would like to do is address some of the buzzwords going around surrounding uh, politics lately, and important things for us to know exactly what these words mean so that we're all on the same page, as at least as far as what words we're using and what they mean, and that might help us construct a better dialogue anyway. And so, starting, of course, with letter A big word that I've heard a lot lately over the last couple of years, in fact, is Antifa. And this one is pretty easy to know what it means if you know that Antifa is simply an abbreviation for anti-fascist. So what Antifa groups are, and this is many different individual groups, not just one group, but they're sort of involved in the same movement. And so Antifa is, they will come out to protest if, for example, fascists are marching in public. So they're left-wing political activists who do engage in uh, protesting, and they're there to fight fascism, to fight against fascism. So I think it's important to know that this group is left-wing, not right-wing, so more liberal, and that they are, yeah, making a lot of splashes in politics in the US and in many other countries around the world. Antifa, yeah, they're a big movement, but simply put, Antifa, short for anti-fascist. So these are political activists who are against fascism. And there you go. And so what about astroturfing? And I know this word looks like it can't be spelled that way, but yeah, that's how you spell it, astroturfing. And so for one, that's a reference to, how on a lot of sports fields, playing fields, like professional uh playing fields, a lot of times it's not actual grass that you're seeing on the field, is astroturf. So this fake stuff that's comes in rolls and goes over it, and so it's pretend grass in a way. So how this applies in politics, if you hear astroturfing, that's when a private company or corporation or some special interest group that's really um yeah, got a lot of money, and they're there to protect their own industry and their own rights and sort of manipulate the public in this way. And so, and that's why Philip Morris USA is also in the picture there. They've been accused of this before. And so what it means is a company with lots of money for their own financial interests are manipulating appearances so it looks like a movement that they've actually started that would is promoting their brand. So it looks more like it's a grassroots movement, grassroots movement built by regular people from the ground up, by networking and community organizing and all of that. Um, and so when a corporate interest comes in and deceives people, mostly on social media campaigns, this is called astroturfing because they're pretending it's grassroots. And so, of the people, from the people, by the people, and for the people, all of those things. But it's really not. It's corporate interests. And so, it's kind of disgusting astroturfing in politics. And by the way, astroturfing, this also happens in very commonly in advertising campaigns. They make it look all like, oh, it's regular people, it's their ideas, but really it's all orchestrated from above, and by above, I mean up the corporate ladder. And so what about B? The first B I've got here is for bleeding heart liberal. And by the way, this is derogatory. It's an insult. So please don't be flinging that at people in an insulting way. Um, and what, of course, it's an insult flung at someone or about someone who is who is politically and well showing concern for those for other groups, let's say less so fortunate in society who are suffering injustices. That would be a bleeding heart liberal, and that's why I thought that a cartoon of Bernie Sanders in the hospital getting diagnosed with a bleeding heart would be pretty appropriate, pretty telling. His politics very much. He's very socialist minded and all of that. And so he certainly qualifies as a bleeding heart liberal. But again, please don't fling this around as an insult. It's derogatory. But some people also do identify themselves as bleeding heart liberals, and that's fine. If you want to identify that way, I think maybe I do. But yeah, not a good thing to fling around as an insult. Um, and so B is also for blue collar. And that's a really important segment of the voting population, of the voting public, blue collar. This means workers who work with their hands. We're talking manual labor and all of that. So this is a very big segment of the voting population. And this covers professions that make a whole variety of different incomes. So it's not just, it's very often associated with working class folks, but we can also get a little into the middle class. It's really manual labor is what this is uh, based around, regardless of how much it pays in some cases. But yeah, the blue collar people do bring a lot of working class values and have similar aspirations to each other. So important voting block. And this is, of course, as opposed to white collar, which would be the more executive types and money types and all of that. So anyway, blue collar, not to be ignored in any political campaign. And so what about Brexit? That's a word we've probably heard plenty in the last couple of years because Brexit did indeed go through. And simply put, Brexit is short for British exit. It's both of those things together. So, of course, that's referring to when the United Kingdom left the European Union. And that did not really surprise me when that happened because it always seemed like they were a little on the fence because they never adopted the euro as a currency for one. They held on to the British pound the whole time. Um, And so, uh, so they always had just their own financial interest at heart more than for the whole of Europe. And what's funny is then, so Brexit goes through, and then we've got Scotland doing a referendum to see if they'll secede from the United Kingdom. So that would be funny. UK leaves the EU, and then Scotland leaves the UK. And I wonder if they would, if that does happen, if they would rejoin the European Union that way. Um, that would be interesting to see how it plays out. Well, the referendum happened, and the conclusion was they would stay in the United Kingdom for now, but people have proposed more referenda, so we never know what's going to happen over there. And that's interesting, politically to me as well. And so getting back to um B words, B buzzwords. B, of course, is for buzzword, and as you can see, there's plenty of these buzzwords here that start with a B, like bellwether state, blue state, bailout. We have all of these, and so of course, battleground state. We know battleground states. That's where the campaigns have to be campaigning the hardest because they're not because the voter base doesn't always lean Democrat or always lean Republican. They got to really work on fighting for those, which I suspect. Well, anyway, which often plays into people's choices of who do they want to bring on as a vice president on the ticket, for instance. And bellwether states are ones are well, they are battleground states, but the ones that are absolutely essential, like this candidate or this ticket couldn't win the election unless they get that state. A lot of times in presidential elections, Ohio is an example of a bellwether state. Anyway, and so we, of course, have lots and lots of other buzzwords. Some start with later letters in the alphabet, so maybe stay tuned to for future volumes of my political buzzwords A to Z. And so this particular volume, volume one, we're only covering A through C. So we still got some more left here. And so C, of course, is for checks and balances. And that is super important to the government of the United States, as well as many other governments, especially democracies, often have systems of checks and balances at play. And this, it's all about what we mean by checks and balances. It's maintaining balance of power so that no power ends up in the hands of one politician or one branch of the government, so that every branch of the government, like in the US, we have the executive branch and the legislative branch and the judicial branch, and they're all supposed to be able to put each other in check to check each other in order to make sure that power is nicely balanced out throughout the government, which is important for having a healthy, functioning democracy, pretty much, and well, a functioning government of any in any sense. So really, it's all about maintaining balance so that the scales don't tip so much, and so one person has all the power or one branch has all the power. So that's all checks and balances is about. So what about cisgender? That's a political and social buzzword quite a bit lately. Um, Comes up often in the discussion of the transgender community, as well as in discussions of folks who are non-binary. And so we have cisgender, and it's funny. Several people have asked me, what does cisgender mean? I'm never sure exactly what they mean when they say that. And usually my answer is if you need to ask what they mean by cisgender, you yourself probably identify that way, because all it means is someone who identifies as the gender that matches the sex that they were assigned at birth, pretty much. And so that's why I have these two babies in the picture there. I think that's a good example of very cisgender. Like we get socialized into one way being more feminine, another way being more masculine. And so gender roles are born and gender standards are born. And so even though these two are just little babies, and so you really wouldn't be able to tell what gender they are just by looking at their face or anything. Um, eh, but we have the little girl all in pink and the little boy all in blue, and it's very, very cisgender, all of that. Very, very traditional gender roles, traditional gender norms, all of that. So if you were born male and assigned male at birth and you identify as a man, that's cisgender, for instance. And so it's all about very, very binary thinking of either male, you're all male, or if you're female, you're all female, and there's really nothing else about it to be said. So pretty much cisgender is mostly conforming to traditional gender norms, and it's about you identifying as the gender that matches the sex that you were assigned at birth. And there you go. And so we also have under C, I couldn't go without mentioning civil disobedience, which of course, civil disobedience, this is some of what the Antifa groups that I mentioned earlier are up to. Of course, civil disobedience implies that protesting remain peaceful. So sometimes civil disobedience ends up, we end up having things go wrong from there, where things get out of control, turn violent, and property destruction. But that is no longer in the realm of what you would call civil disobedience. That's your peaceful protesting and all that. Um, and so I think a key word in here is civil. Be civil. Although I did mention Antifa, the group this picture of is not an Antifa group. This particular protest is from a bunch of climate activists who are trying to spread the message about climate change and fighting climate change. And so that's what this particular example of civil disobedience was about when it happened. And this is something that goes on, again, not uniquely in America, but all over the world, and mostly, most importantly, um, it often accompanies democracies, right? It's one part of democracy. It's how you get things changed, how you make movements happen. So disobedience is one of those little keys that we use. Now, also for C is for class struggle. So the class struggle, pretty much what we're referring to here, if someone is referring to the class struggle, it's really the working class plight to get their fair share as far as money, economic equity, and also political power and all that. It's sort of yeah, this is working class struggling to get what they truly deserve, what the fair share is out of society. And that's why I included the picture, well, not just the photograph of the strike going on, and there's a rally going on there, and but also the one that's a good, well, artistic interpretation of it, where you have the working class folks all suffering on the bottom just to keep all the rich people up top, all enjoying life and living life, and meanwhile, on the bottom, the working class are very much suffering. So that's what we're talking about when we talk about the class struggle. And so beyond the class struggle, we have C is for climate change. So I mentioned that picture that we saw where of some climate change activists, well, people out, climate activists, people trying to fight climate change and spread of the message that others should also fight it too. And so we have a lot of climate related and climate change related buzzwords around public politics, like if you've heard of climate denial, that's another way of saying climate change denial. So what that means is simply is these people who are climate change denial backers or people who don't believe that climate change is real, and they're people who don't believe that human activities are causing any climate change. So we got climate change is not real, or maybe some accept, okay, yeah, climate change is a natural course of Earth's evolution over time, but they refuse to accept that human activities are contributing to it. So that's climate denial or climate change denial. And it's interesting how you have a group of people who we call climate change deniers um, in existence and quite vocal. And a lot of the people on the other side of this would accuse them of it's all about corporate greed. So don't be in denial of what's happening to our planet. But either way, this is a pretty divisive issue. It's for some a big existential threat. And for others, it's others like to paint it as more like a hoax. And so what's interesting is we have people on both sides of that political argument, but we do have a reality when you hear talk of climate mobility or climate refugees, we're kind of talking about the same thing. These are people who had to migrate very far from their homes because of climate change related issues, because flooding's happening too much, or big natural disasters go on more and more often as a result of climate change. And so we have climate mobility. That's people or all segments of populations all moving around to be living in more livable climates, in more habitable climates, because they're where they come from, it isn't so doable anymore. And so these can be climate mobility can be talking about people relocating within their own country, going maybe far, but staying within their own country borders, or it can talk about people who migrate to different countries that way. So same thing, climate mobility. In climate refugees are some people who are migrating. They're in the process of or already have migrated because of climate change related reasons, same thing. So there's a lot of political buzzwords, climate, and which I do think that is why climate change keeps end up being a pretty important issue every time we have another presidential election in the US, because yeah, we only have the one planet, so there you go. And so in addition to climate change, we've got critical theory, and also we hear critical race theory. These both start with C, and this is sociologically speaking. This is critical theory is the analysis of the power structures in society and the study of how those power structures in society influence things such as injustices, racial prejudices, other social issues. So it's all connected, and that's why we often hear critical race theory, because that's the part of critical theory that's focusing most on race relations and racial prejudices and all that. But it's part of an even bigger package, and it's all about how the power structures in society, um, yeah, analyzing how maybe we could get the power structures in society working better to be more equitable, to make, yeah, to help with equality and equity for people of all backgrounds, regardless of income or gender or race or age, or all of those things. Critical theory is all about that. So that's what they're talking about, critical theory. And that's why sometimes you hear critical race theory, because racial prejudices are part of critical theory. And one big branch of critical theory is critical race theory, of course. And so one other thing that's keeping us down, in addition to power structures, is crony capitalism. And what is crony capitalism? This is a an economic system where you have corrupt politicians and super greedy business people, business owners, trying to pretty much just concentrate all the power and all the money in themselves, right? They're making each other rich. It's everybody's out scratching each other's backs. And so politicians get richer, the greeter companies get richer, and all this comes at the expense of the taxpayer and the consumer, honestly. So honestly, yeah, crony capitalism, that's a lot of backroom deals and a lot of real shady stuff going on so that they can all pad their damn wallets. And there you go. And who suffers over it? The little guy, the regular guy. And that's it. That's very, very sad. And so I think the very last one on my list for well, political buzzwords that start in C would be culture wars. And it reminds me of cancel culture, right? There's a few things, few buzzwords, right, around the word culture and politics in English. And so what are culture wars? What is a culture war? That's pretty much any public debate that's really divisive and where people have really strong feelings on each side. So that would be considered a culture war. For instance, abortion, uh, pro-life versus pro-choice, all of that. That is one example of culture war going on in this country. And or we also have, again, we have the climate activists and then the climate change deniers, all, they're on opposite sides of this. And often, yeah, anyway, so it's all about anything called a culture where it's just a public debate where people fall really far on one side or really far on the other, and they have very strong feelings about it. Very unoften are people really willing to compromise on these culture wars, but hey. And so why that brought cancel culture to mind for me was that cancel culture has been applied so many times and usually in a very self-serving way. Um, For instance, when Andrew Cuomo, former governor of New York, Andrew Cuomo was shamed out of office pretty much, um, he was calling that cancel culture. But, he was being, well, accused of creating a hostile work environment and sexual misconduct and harassment, all these kinds of things. And he's playing it off as if it's cancel culture just because they're out to get him. So therefore, it means cancel culture. No, sorry, Andrew Cuomo. They were coming after you because you were a creep. Um, but anyway, and or also, and when you have, let's say, some very conservative groups um, involved in helping get books banned from local public libraries or local school libraries, some more liberal folks might call that an example of cancel culture, right? It depends. Sometimes calling it cancel culture, it's relative. It's very subjective in the sense that people are only usually seeing it from their own point of view. So now, on the other side, one thing that we had happen not too long ago in Albany, well, within the last 4 years, um, people were calling cancel culture because the statue of Philip J. Schuyler was taken down in front of the city hall. And why is that? He was an important historic figure for Albany, um, dating back to he was a general in the American Revolution and all of that. Um, but he also he was at the time the guy who owned more slaves than anybody else in the area. So had to get rid of his statue. And so from there, the more conservatives were calling this cancel culture, whereas the liberals were calling this a necessary step in progress forward. But anyway, so culture wars, and that's why I relate cancel culture to culture wars, because depending on what side you're on of a given culture war, you might have a very different interpretation of what means cancel culture and that. And anyway, that's all my words from A through C for the buzzwords. And please do, if you can think of any others, put them in the chat. I would love to hear it. Or actually, better yet, if you're watching it on the replay, put it in the comment section so it will be available viewing a little more permanently. And again, thank you as always to everybody who watches until the very end. I always appreciate that very, very much. And I will keep working on, I'm already working on volume 2. And so um, I will have that out in just a few days and I'll let you know very soon. And so I will see you around then. And thanks again, as always, for everybody who watches my videos, and especially to those of you who watch to the end. I appreciate that more than you can know. See you around next time. Bye-bye.